Ready to level up your relationships? Let's do it. We're cracking open a classic today, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Timeless.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We're not just skimming the surface. Nope. This deep dive is all about your hand-picked excerpts. You know, the ones you flagged because they really resonated.
A personalized playbook for better connections. I love it.
Right. Because who has time to reread the whole thing when you need a quick win?
Okay.
So we're going straight for the good stuff, those time-tested tactics for better relationships. And let me tell you, the stories Carnegie tells, the ones that bring these principles to life, pure gold.
He wrote this nearly a century ago. Can you believe that? Yet it's more relevant than ever, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's like he cracked some secret code of human interaction, especially in our world of like constant communication overload, right? Being able to genuinely connect, really connect with others. That's powerful.
It's everything.
And that leads us straight to our first golden nugget from your excerpts, the power of genuine interest.
Ah, yes, Carnegie's truth bomb.
Right.
He's basically saying if you want to influence people, forget manipulation, ditch the smoke and mirrors, just get genuinely interested in them.
No ulterior motives, just pure connection. And the best part, Carnegie walked the walk. Imagine this. Young Dale, fresh out of college, riding his horse, get this 3 miles each day just to teach public speaking.
Wow.
And not for big bucks either. He was basically working on commission. He got paid only if his students saw results.
That speaks volumes, doesn't it? It wasn't just a theory to him, it was his life.
Exactly. And that ties in beautifully with another excerpt you chose, which is all about handling disagreements with grace, something I know you're really passionate about, especially with your focus on multiple perspectives.
Right. Because, let's face it, disagreements, totally inevitable, part of life.
Yeah.
But they don't have to be relationship destroyers. And one of my favorite Carnegie quotes, which he actually borrowed from Henry Ford, says it all. If there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as from your own.
Okay, love it. Pinning that one to my vision board.
Ah.
But the question is, how often do we actually manage to do that? To step outside ourselves and truly see the world through someone else's eyes?
It's definitely a practice, not a one-time thing. But Carnegie understood its power, especially for diffusing conflict. Remember that story he tells about the department store, the damaged coat, and the irate customer?
Oh yeah, talk about a meltdown.
Total meltdown.
We had this customer who was furious. Apparently, she found a rip in the lining of this coat. It had been on sale, but still.
Right.
So, of course, she goes back to the store, hoping for an exchange, and the clerk hits her with the classic, all sales final. Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Right, like no attempt to understand her frustration whatsoever.
Zero empathy.
But here's where it gets good. The department manager, who happens to know this woman is a long-time, loyal customer,
Smart.
steps in, and instead of dismissing her, she listens. She really listens, acknowledges how frustrating it must be, and then the magic touch offers a solution.
Music to the customer's ears.
Right. Not only did they probably save a customer, but imagine how that shifted the energy.
It totally de-escalated the situation.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what happens in those heated moments, even when we are trying to be understanding? You know, when things get really tense. What's Carnegie's wisdom for navigating those choppy waters?
Well, that's where one of his most practical, maybe even bravest principles comes into play.
Okay.
If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically.
Whoa. Okay. Talk about going against our natural instincts. Isn't it more common to double down, get defensive, even when we know deep down that we messed up?
100%. But as Carnegie points out, digging in our heels just drags things out and damages the relationship. Imagine the relief the other person feels when we just come clean. It's disarming, and it opens the door for a more constructive conversation, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like clearing the air for a fresh start.
Huh.
And speaking of clearing the air, Carnegie definitely had some thoughts on criticism. And he wasn't suggesting we sugarcoat everything, right?
Not at all. He wasn't about dodging tough conversations, but he did recognize that criticism, especially the blunt, hammer to the head kind,
Oh, yeah,
can be a total buzzkill.
for sure.
He believed that if you want to see positive change, a little appreciation goes a long way.
So we've established that a little appreciation can work wonders. But what about those times when we really need to, win someone over to our way of thinking? Because let's be real, sometimes we need to rally the troops.
Right. We all want to be heard.
Exactly. And what I find so fascinating about Carnegie is that he wasn't about strong-arming people into agreement. He actually cautioned against, get this, trying to win arguments altogether, which seems kind of counterintuitive, don't you think?
It does go against our gut instinct to defend our position,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Especially when we're convinced, totally convinced that we're in the right.
Right. So what's the magic formula? How do we get people on board without turning it into a battle of wills?
Well, Carnegie, he was all about human nature. He just got it. And he knew that contradicting someone head on, it usually just makes them defensive, even if secretly they're having second thoughts.
Like that saying you can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into.
100%. So instead of going for the jugular, Carnegie suggested something kind of surprising. Ready for this?
Hit me.
Start by finding common ground.
Okay.
He has this great example about dealing with an angry customer who was convinced his company had overcharged him.
Oh, yeah. This guy was ready to storm the castle. He was absolutely certain, like no doubt in his mind, that he was right. He wanted justice. So what did Carnegie do? Did he try to bury the guy in facts and figures?
Nope. Instead of arguing, he actually agreed with him.
Whoa, really? That seems risky.
It does, right? But there's a strategy to it. Carnegie said something like, I don't blame you one bit for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do.
Talk about disarming the situation. By acknowledging the customer's feelings, he probably just took the wind right out of his sails. So what happened next? Did the customer back down?
He did. Because suddenly, instead of this heated argument, they were having a calm, rational conversation. And once that tension was gone, Carnegie was able to present the facts in a way that let the customer, save face and come to his own conclusion.
Brilliant. It just goes to show how powerful it can be to meet someone where they are. It's not about, giving in. It's about creating a space for understanding.
Exactly.
And speaking of understanding, another one of your excerpts focused on the importance of respecting other people's opinions, even in the heat of disagreement. In fact, Carnegie had this golden rule.
Never say, you're wrong. It's so simple, right?
Right.
Yeah, how often do we break it? Especially these days, right? Where it seems like everyone's got an opinion and social media is always there to amplify the disagreements.
Always.
But imagine how much more productive our conversations would be if we just started from a place of respect, even when we see things totally differently.
Right. Imagine.
And Carnegie takes it even a step further. He says, if you really want to win someone over to your way of thinking, ditch the arguments and instead focus on their interests and desires.
Okay.
Figure out what they want and show them how to get it.
He's really tapping into that idea that people are ultimately driven by their own needs and wants.
You know
right?
what? 100%. And he has this wonderfully quirky story about a calf.
Oh, I love this story.
A calf, a barn, and a very wise Irish housemaid.
It perfectly illustrates this principle.
Oh,
okay. So paint the picture for us.
All right, so picture this. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
As in the Ralph Waldo Emerson.
The one and only. Famous writer, thinker, He's trying to get this calf into a barn.
Okay.
He's pushing, he's pulling, his son's doing the same. But the calf is having none of it.
Classic standoff.
Total standoff. They're so focused on what they want that calf in the barn that they're totally missing the calf's perspective.
And the calf, being a calf, is equally set on, not moving.
Exactly. So enter this Irish housemaid. I imagine she's seen this all before.
She's wise to the ways of stubborn calves.
Exactly. So what does she do? She puts her finger in the calf's mouth and lets it suckle.
So simple.
And yet, it works like a charm. The calf, happy as can be, trots right into the barn.
And that, my friend, is Carnegie's point in a nutshell.
If you want to get a calf into a barn, first find out what the calf wants.
Love it. And it applies to so much more than just stubborn calves. Think about, a recent disagreement you had with someone. How might shifting your focus to the other person's calf, their wants and needs, have changed how things played out?
That is such a good question.
It is. And it leads us to another important point, one that Carnegie dedicated a whole chapter to. The power of listening.
Oh, yes. He recognized that most people, they don't listen to understand, they listen to reply.
It's so true. We're all guilty of that from time to time. But how do we break that habit? How do we become better listeners?
Well, Carnegie had a tip for that too. He said, encourage others to talk about themselves. He understood that we love to share our experiences, our passions, our stories.
It's like that saying, everyone's the hero of their own story.
Exactly. Am I giving them the space to do that? We're not just learning about them, but we're also making them feel valued, appreciated.
And when someone feels valued, they're much more likely to be open to what we have to say, right?
Exactly. It's all about building that connection, that foundation of trust.
Speaking of connection, Carnegie was also a big believer in the power of remembering names. It sounds so simple, but he considered it one of the most effective ways to build rapport. In fact, he called it, and I love this, the sweetest and most important sound in any language.
I bet that resonates with you, given your focus on understanding multiple perspectives. When someone remembers our name, it makes us feel seen, right? Like we're not just another face in the crowd.
Exactly. It's like this tiny affirmation. It says, you matter. And Carnegie has this great story about how a simple act of remembering someone's name led to this wonderfully unexpected encounter. He was at a bridge party.
Of course he was.
And like you, he wasn't there to play bridge. But he meets this woman who recognizes him as Lowell Thomas's former manager.
Lowell Thomas, she must have been a fan.
She was. And she was so excited to chat with him about his travels and his experiences in Europe. Carnegie, being Carnegie, was happy to share his stories. But imagine how much that small act, just remembering his connection to Lowell Thomas, must have meant to her. It probably made her whole day.
It's a beautiful example of how those little gestures, those small acts of kindness and recognition can create these ripples of connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of making others feel important, it was huge G for Carnegie. He believed that desire for a feeling of importance, it's this basic human drive. It's something that cuts across all backgrounds, all social strata.
He really did. And he uses this fascinating range of examples to prove his point. From Al Capone to Charles Schwab to Theodore Roosevelt, even people who seem to have it all,
Right.
they crave that recognition, that sense of significance.
It really makes you realize that beneath all the surface differences, right,
Yeah.
we're all connected by this very human need to be seen, to be valued for who we are.
It's such a powerful realization.
It is. And it means that we all have the capacity to make a difference in the lives of others, just by acknowledging their worth, expressing genuine appreciation. And you know what else? Sometimes that appreciation means acknowledging our own shortcomings and celebrating the strengths of others.
Oh, for sure. Recognizing when someone else is better suited for a task or has a particular strength that we can learn from, that's huge.
It's a strength in itself.
Yeah.
And Carnegie tells this great story about Otto von Bismarck,
Oh, I love Bismarck.
a chancellor of Germany, and Kaiser Wilhelm I. Now, Bismarck was this brilliant strategist, but even HE had to navigate the Kaiser's, shall we say, strong personality,
The Kaiser was known for being a bit headstrong.
to put it mildly. So one day, Bismarck needs to get this new army bill passed, a bill that he knows the Kaiser will probably oppose.
Oh, boy. This should be good. How did he pull it off?
A little strategic flattery, my friend.
I love it.
He presented the bill and said something like, Your Majesty, I beg to submit this bill for your consideration. However, I'm fully aware that Your Majesty's vast experience and military genius far exceed my own. If Your Majesty believes this bill is flawed, I am more than willing to withdraw it.
He appealed to his vanity and disarmed his opposition.
Exactly. The Kaiser, feeling validated, respected, approves the bill without a fuss. Now, I'm not saying we should go around buttering people up.
Right.
But it does show how powerful it can be to genuinely acknowledge the strengths and expertise of others.
Absolutely. It's recognizing that each person has something valuable to offer. And that's especially important when we're talking about building strong, lasting relationships.
And speaking of building relationships, Carnegie talks a lot about the importance of genuine interest, which I love how this all connects, brings us right back to where we started.
Full circle.
And he goes beyond just surface-level chit-chat. He encourages people to dig deeper, really tap into the passions and hobbies of those around them.
Absolutely. And he tells this really charming story about one of his students who was tasked with giving a speech on the principles of appreciation.
Okay.
To practice, he decided to, test out his material on his wife's elderly aunt during a family visit.
Talk about a captive audience. What happened?
Well, this student wasn't particularly close to the aunt, but he was determined to find something about her to genuinely admire. He started by complimenting her on her beautiful house, which, as it turned out, had been built the same year he was born.
What a great conversation starter. Those little coincidences, you know?
You really can break the ice. And that simple comment, it opened the floodgates. The aunt, thrilled to have someone to share her treasures with, gave him a full tour of her home.
Oh.
Showed off her collection of paisley shawls, her antique tea set, her Italian paintings, her silk draperies.
Wow.
Apparently, they once hung in a French chateau. She even took him out to the garage
No.
and unveiled her prized possession, a vintage Packard in mint condition.
I can imagine his jaw dropping.
Right. They spent hours chatting about her car, her travels, her life. The student who started the conversation as a way to practice his speech found himself completely charmed by this woman and her stories.
All because he took the time to express genuine interest, genuine appreciation.
That's exactly it.
It really proves that we can find common ground with anyone if we're willing to look for it.
I completely agree.
And you know what? Sometimes that genuine interest can lead to these unexpected opportunities. Remember that story about Edward E. Harriman?
Oh,
And
yeah.
elusive R.J. Funkhauser?
A classic example of a little resourcefulness.
So for those who haven't heard this one, give us the rundown.
All right, so Edward Harriman is fresh out of the military looking for work in the Cumberland Valley, where at the time jobs were scarce.
Cuff break.
He learns that a lot of the companies are controlled by this reclusive business tycoon named R.J. Funkhauser.
Okay.
And this guy, Funkhauser, was notorious for being impossible to get a hold of. Most people would have given up, but not Harriman.
What did he do?
Instead of sending a generic application, he did his homework. He wrote Funkhauser a personalized letter expressing admiration for his business savvy. He did his research,
Wow.
mentioned that he'd studied his career in college.
Talk about a power move. He really tailored his approach.
He did, and it worked. Funkhauser was so impressed by Harriman's initiative and his genuine interest that he gave him an interview, which led to a job offer.
That's incredible. It's a great reminder that sometimes taking that extra step, that extra effort to connect on a personal level, it can make all the difference.
100%. In this world of mass emails and generic applications, a little personalization goes a long way.
Now, another thing Carnegie was a big advocate for was the power of, wait for it, delegating
Oh, yes.
and empowering others to shine.
Yeah.
And he had this story about a woman named Rose
Okay.
who was in charge of the refreshment stand at a school concert.
Not the most glamorous gig.
No, but somebody's got to do it.
She was feeling super overwhelmed because she was trying to do everything herself.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Handling the money, serving the refreshments, supervising the volunteers. It was just too much. It's so easy to fall into that trap, right? Thinking we have to do it all.
The superhero complex.
Hmm.
But then Rose has this light bulb moment. Instead of soldiering on, she decides to delegate, to share the load, to give others a chance to step up, take ownership.
Love it.
She gave the cash box to a friend, asked for her help in keeping the money straight, put another friend in charge of the soda machine,
Smart.
even had her train the teenage volunteers. So by sharing the responsibility, she not only reduced her own stress,
Yeah.
but she also created this more positive, empowering experience for everyone. And I bet things ran way more smoothly.
They always do. And this whole idea of delegating, it's not just for school concerts. Carnegie argues that it's essential in the workplace, too.
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, he tells this great story
Lay it on us.
about a furniture factory facing a seemingly impossible deadline.
Oh, no. What happened?
They get this huge rush order from a VIP client, and the manager knows it's going to be tight.
Nail biter.
Total nail biter. But instead of freaking out, barking orders, he gets his team together, explains the situation.
Smart.
He emphasizes that this isn't just about the company's bottom line.
Right.
It's about their jobs, their livelihoods.
He's appealing to their self-interest, but also creating this sense of like, we're all in this together.
Exactly. Shared purpose.
Yeah.
And then he asks for their input.
Okay.
How can we make this happen? What ideas do you have? Can we adjust our schedules, our assignments? What do you think?
He empowered them to be part of the solution.
Exactly.
And I bet they knocked it out of the park.
They did. They totally rose to the occasion. By working together, brainstorming, adjusting their schedules, they were able to deliver on time.
Love that. It's a perfect illustration of the power of teamwork, right?
Absolutely. When you create an environment where people feel heard, empowered, amazing things happen.
It's true. And speaking of empowering others, Carnegie reminds us to be generous with our praise, our recognition. In fact, he actually said,
Ooh, I love when you do this.
be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise.
Music to my ears.
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in what people are doing wrong, to focus on the negative. But imagine the impact we could have if we just made a conscious effort to catch people doing things right.
Absolutely. And to make that praise really hit home, Carnegie suggests keeping it genuine and specific.
Oh, that is.
Tell people exactly what they did well and why it matters.
It's so much more impactful than just a generic, good job.
100%.
Now, he also advised against something that I think a lot of us are guilty of, which is mixing praise with criticism.
Oh, that's worse.
It's like giving someone a delicious cookie and then immediately following it with a shot of vinegar.
Right. It just sours the whole experience. The criticism, however well-intentioned, ends up overshadowing the good stuff. So how do we give that constructive feedback, but without negating all the positive?
Right. It's a delicate balance.
It really is. I think it's about being mindful of our delivery. When we acknowledge someone's achievements,
Yeah.
do it wholeheartedly.
Yes.
No buts, no caveats.
I love that. Just pure, unadulterated praise.
Exactly. And then, if we need to offer some constructive criticism, focus on the behavior, not the person.
And always, always balance it with genuine appreciation.
Always. We all crave that recognition, that encouragement.
It helps us grow. Now, on the flip side, Carnegie also had some wise words about handling criticism gracefully because, let's be honest, even well-intentioned feedback can sting.
Oh, yeah. Especially if it feels personal.
Exactly. It's so easy to get defensive when we feel like we're being attacked.
Totally human.
And he illustrates this with a great story about a young lawyer.
Okay.
He's arguing a case before, wait for it, the Supreme Court.
No pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk about high stakes. So during his argument, one of the justices points out a flaw in his logic, suggesting that the statute of limitations in admiralty law is 6 years.
Oh, boy. That's going to be a nerve-wracking moment, being called out by a Supreme Court justice.
Talk about pressure. And this lawyer, bless his heart, instead of taking a breath, he insists that the justice is mistaken.
Oof. I can feel the tension from here.
Right. Bold move. But probably not the best one.
Probably not.
Because guess what? The justices, completely unfazed, pulls out a law book and points to the relevant passage.
Oh, no.
Right. Can you imagine this lawyer's face at that moment?
I bet he wanted to crawl under the table.
Right. But instead of digging himself into a deeper hole by making excuses, he takes a deep breath
Good for him.
and says, Your Honor, I apologize. I am wrong.
Mic drop.
Right. And the best part, the justices, clearly impressed by the lawyer's humility, continues the discussion in a much more cordial, constructive way.
Wow.
So despite that initial stumble, the young lawyer was able to recover and present his argument effectively.
I love that story.
It's a good one, right? And it's a reminder that admitting our mistakes, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's in front of the Supreme Court,
Right.
is always the best policy. It shows that we're willing to learn, we're willing to grow.
And people respect that.
They do.
Yeah.
And it often earns us the trust of those around us.
But you know what? This feels like a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but there are still some juicy Carnegie nuggets to unpack.
All right, welcome back to the grand finale of our deep dive into how to win friends and influence people. We've covered so much ground already: the power of genuine interest, the art of handling disagreements gracefully.
So much good stuff.
But of course, Carnegie saved some of his best stuff for last, right?
Always.
In this final stretch, we're going to explore how to really light that fire of enthusiasm in others. I got to say, this is one of my favorite parts.
It's a good one. Carnegie truly believed that enthusiasm, it's contagious,
Oh, yeah?
but you can't just force it on people, can you? It's got to be genuine.
It's got to be authentic. So how do we do that? How do we create that kind of environment where enthusiasm spreads like wildfire?
Well, Carnegie believed it starts with us. If we're genuinely fired up about something, that passion, it becomes infectious.
I love that. It's like enthusiasm is its own language, right?
Totally.
But what about those times? Because let's be honest, we've all been there when we're just not feeling it. The enthusiasm well has run dry. Any advice from Carnegie for those moments?
Whoa, he's got us covered. And this one might surprise you. He said, and get ready for it. Act enthusiastic and you'll be enthusiastic.
Wait, really? He's advocating for fake it till you make it.
He kind of is. He's basically saying, even if we don't feel it at first, by going through the motions, smiling, and injecting energy into our voice, even when we're not really feeling it, we can actually trick our brains into, well, feeling more positive.
Interesting. So by changing our outward behavior, we can actually shift our internal state.
Exactly. And he wasn't saying to be phony or disingenuous about it. It's more about consciously shifting our mindset, letting that positive energy radiate outward.
I bet he's got a story to illustrate this.
Oh, does he ever? He tells a story about a salesman who is struggling to, close deals. He'd lost his mojo and his sales numbers in the basement.
Ouch.
So Carnegie gives him this advice: act enthusiastic. Put on a smile, he says. Inject some energy into your voice, even if you don't quite feel it at first.
So he was basically telling him to act.
Kind of, but it's more than just putting on a show. It's about recognizing that our actions, they can influence our feelings
Interesting.
just as much as our feelings can influence our actions.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
like a two-way street.
Exactly. And guess what? This salesman, skeptical as can be, decides to give it a try, starts projecting enthusiasm,
Right.
and it works. He starts feeling more confident, more passionate about what he's doing. Sales numbers go up,
No way.
and he rediscovers his love for the job.
That's incredible. It really speaks to the power of our mindset, right?
100%.
If we can shift our thinking, we can actually change our reality.
Carnegie said it best. Happiness doesn't depend on outward conditions. It depends on inner conditions.
Oh, I like that one. It's a good reminder that happiness is a choice,
Powerful.
not just a result of, like, our circumstance.
Exactly. And choosing happiness, it often starts with gratitude.
Oh, I love that.
Focusing on the good stuff,
Yes.
no matter how small.
Love it. So, to recap, if we want to inspire enthusiasm in others, it all starts with cultivating our own internal state of, well, happiness, right?
Correct.
Positivity.
Nailed it. And Carnegie actually had a surprisingly simple technique for boosting happiness.
Oh, do tell.
Ready for this? Smile.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. He believed that even if we don't feel like it, the act of smiling can trigger those feel-good chemicals in our brains.
I love that. We can trick our brains into feeling happier. And the best part, it's free.
Exactly. And to back this up, he actually quotes the famous psychologist William James, who said, "Action seems to follow feeling, but really action and feeling go together. And by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling, which is not..."
Okay, that's a mouthful. But the takeaway is we've got more power over our emotions than we think.
We absolutely do. So next time you're feeling down, try a smile, whistle a happy tune, sing a song. The key is to act as if you're happy.
I love it. Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. And you know what? That positive energy, it spreads like wildfire.
I love it. But enthusiasm alone, it's not always enough to get people on board with our ideas, right?
You're absolutely right. And Carnegie addresses this head on. He says, to truly influence someone, we need to go a step further.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
We need to arouse in them an eager want.
An eager want. Now, that's a new one. Tell me more.
He's basically saying we need to tap into their desires, their motivations, their dreams. What are they passionate about? What do they want to achieve? And how can our ideas, our products, our services, whatever it is we're offering, how can it help them get there?
So it's not about manipulating people. It's about really understanding them
Yeah.
and then aligning our goals with theirs.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, he tells this really cute story about a young boy who is giving his parents, let's just say, a run for their money when it came to eating vegetables.
Oh, I've been there. Tried it all.
Yeah.
Lectures, threats, bribes, nothing worked.
Every parent's struggle.
So what did they do?
Well, the dad finally has this stroke of genius. Instead of focusing on what he wanted, which was for the kid to eat his veggies,
Of course.
he tapped into what the boy wanted.
And what did this veggie-averse child want?
It to be big and strong, of course. He wanted to be able to beat up the neighborhood bully who'd been picking on him.
Ah, the classic tale of good versus evil. So how did the dad use that to his advantage?
He made the kid a deal. He said, if you eat your vegetables, you'll grow big and strong enough to take on that bully. And guess what?
It worked.
It works like a charm.
No way. He
Yeah.
actually ate his spinach.
Devoured it, along with his carrots, and even, get this, Brussels sprouts.
You're kidding. That's amazing. What a simple story, but it really drives home the point.
Right.
If you want to influence someone, figure out what makes them tick and appeal to that. Appeal to their desire.
Exactly. And to really drive that point home, Carnegie quotes Harry A. Overstreet, who said, "Action springs out of what we fundamentally desire. And the best piece of advice, which can be given to would-be persuaders, whether in business, in the home, in the school, in politics, is, first, arouse in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way."
Wow, chills. Powerful stuff. So how do we apply this arouse an eager want principle in our own lives?
It all goes back to something we were talking about earlier, listening. And I mean really listening.
Carnegie was a huge proponent of that.
He really was. And it's so easy to get caught up in our own heads,
So tell me about it.
thinking about what we're going to say next, that we completely miss what the other person is trying to tell us.
Guilty as charged. But how do we break that habit? How do we become more present, more engaged listeners?
Well, Carnegie suggests some pretty simple things, making eye contact, nodding our heads, asking clarifying questions, like, tell me more about that, and then summarizing what we've heard,
Oh, that's good.
just to make sure we're on the same page.
It's like we're proving that we're really listening, not just waiting for our turn to talk.
Exactly. And when we do that, when we truly listen to others, we're showing them respect.
Right.
We value their thoughts and feelings.
Which is essential for any relationship, really.
100%. Because at the end of the day, it's those connections, those relationships,
That's what it's all about.
they're what bring us the most joy, the most meaning.
Beautifully said.
Mm.
And, when you look at all of Carnegie's advice, it really boils down to one fundamental principle.
What's that?
Treat others the way you want to be treated.
The golden rule.
Timeless.
Yeah.
And, it's been around for centuries for a reason.
There you go.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this incredible deep dive.
I agree. This has been amazing.
And remember, this deep dive was curated just for you.
We hope this has been helpful, giving you some practical tools to enhance your relationships, create more meaningful connections.
And if there's one thing we hope you take away from this, it's that this whole journey of self-improvement, of relationship building, it's an ongoing process.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep those connections strong. Happy connecting.